Spring training is finally here. Before we get farther into games, let's break down some of these new real changes in 2023. And also, let's give some reasons why to be excited about the basement teams in every single division. Welcome to the OK Baseball Podcast. It's always baseball season. That's what our intro says, and we are right in the thick of it now. Welcome to spring training, and welcome to the OK Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, here with my outstanding co-host with a nice clean cut now. No long beard no more. Rocking the chin strap I see. Sean Doyle, welcome into the show. And Sean, I have to just let you know, we are in episode 13, and if you know, and I know, your favorite player rocks number 13, Manny Machado. So just had to put that out there. Welcome to episode 13, good old Manny Machado. For the record, before I even let you say a single word on this show today, he has announced that he is going to opt out this season. How wild would it be if he just donned the Toronto Blue Jays blue, white, and red next season? Would your hate for Manny Machado go away? Oh, by the way, welcome to the show.
Wow, that I'd be lying if I said that hadn't crossed my mind. However, I guarantee you I will not be a fan of that move. Just so you know, Matt Chapman can stay until he's 80 before Manny Machado signs in Toronto. Just my own personal opinion. Of course.
And for the record, I do not believe Manny Machado is going to leave San Diego. I think he's just doing what every free agent has the right to do, opt out. He made a funny joke saying that, have you seen the price of eggs go up? The money has changed. The market has changed. And obviously, if Manny Machado's worried about eggs, that guy needs a better contract. So obviously, his contract's fantastic, though. So regardless of the case, yeah, I don't think Manny Machado is leaving. Don't think he'll be a Toronto Blue Jay anytime soon. You can continue your hate, but I will say by the time this season is over, I'm going to find some way, shape, or form to get you to say some positive things about Manny Machado before the season's over. I bet it happens. There's going to be so many good things. That guy, he's going to be right in the MVP race again. So welcome to episode 13. There's our final rant for that one. That's what we should do. Every episode until we get to 99, I guess, we should dedicate each episode to a certain jersey number, talk about our favorite jersey. So you got 14 next. You got to figure that one out. But let's get what we're really talking about today. And let's talk about the rule changes in 2023. Obviously, spring training has already started, but we're coming at you live this weekend here. And there's a lot of really interesting things to talk about. The first thing that comes up to my mind, right off the bat, Sean, is the pitch timer. The clock is, you can't miss it 100%. It is right there. Some people on social media don't like it. Some say it gives them anxiety. I absolutely loved it. I'll be completely honest. I was paying attention to, I watched every single pitch of the Padres-Mariners spring training game on Friday, and I absolutely loved it. Nick Martinez did really good, and I thought it was great. The pace of play was fantastic. We were under 2.5 hours of gameplay, and if we can get 2.5 hour games this season, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
And didn't your boy Manny Machado get the first 0-1 count?
He certainly did. Isn't that interesting? It's the pitch timer, the rule changes, all that thing's happening. Yeah, he was the first ever player, and now it won't be official because it's not. It's in spring training, but I'm sure people will never forget. That's a great Jeopardy question, by the way. Who was the first player? Manny Machado holds that. Yeah, he had his foot out of the box once the 8 seconds hit, and he was called for a strike for not being ready and the plate. Very interesting. I think we're going to see a decent amount of that happen this year. Hopefully a lot of the cobwebs come out during spring training, but it's going to, I think it happens to like one player. You'll happen to somebody once in maybe a month or 2 month span. And then they're going to figure out they need to really get it going. I don't see the batter or the pitcher really having a lot of issues with this pitch clock. Now, 15 seconds when there's no one on base, 20 seconds when there's somebody on base. It did seem like a long time. There was only a few amount of pitches where someone got down to the 3, 2, or 1 second during the Padres-Mariners game. I thought the pace of play was fantastic. I thought that we did probably see a little bit more nervousness. There was probably a little bit more balls in this one than we were probably anticipating. I think that changes, though. I think we will get down to more strikes being thrown, We will see some more things being just handled during the spring. And we also talking. This is the first game of spring training as well, so I don't want to throw it all on the reasons of the pitch timer. However, I thought it was really cool. What was your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think actually what we're going to see at this point, I think you're seeing a lot of guys, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later as we get into this. But Kenley Jansen, one of them, saying that they're actually aiming for an even quicker time, just to kind of get used to the I guess being quicker. So instead of being 15 seconds, maybe being in at around 11 or 12, just to make sure that you have that kind of cushion. And so I would imagine what's going to happen using that logic, you're going to see that the quicker games will be in the beginning, spring training, beginning of the season. And then as we get into the end of the season and playoff races and games mean that much more, I think you're actually going to see maybe even teams flirting with that pitch clock right on the nose, taking a little bit longer. Perhaps maybe we'll see more violations in that sense, just because even though they're used to the quicker play by that point, the games mean more, and so you are going to take a bit more time. I just wonder if that may be the outcome here.
Yeah, I think you are absolutely right. When this happens, we're obviously going to see some pitchers that will probably fatigue later on in the year that might actually come into play, and that's something that we really got to pay attention to. Let's keep on this conversation, the pitch timer, since we're already on the conversation here. Kenley Jansen is the player that we both agree with, and I don't know if you have anybody else, but how he's probably going to have to be impacted the most with this pitch timer. He was, according to stats, he was the slowest pitcher in last year and for a couple of years straight. He was already working at home in December, getting his pitch timer figured out. We're going to see him later on this weekend and see if he can actually figure that one out as well. I think that is a good indication to see if a pitcher, especially a veteran pitcher who didn't go through the minor leagues the last few years while the pitch timer was happening, if he can figure it out, then anyone can, especially somebody at the age of Kenley Jansen who's kind of seen the thick of it, his ups and downs. He's been an all-star. He's had some of the worst seasons in the last 5 years. If Kenley Jansen can figure it out, I don't think anybody should have any worry.
Yeah, he's an interesting case. In Baseball Savant at Statcast, they have their kind of leaderboards for pitch tempo, right? So just how fast a pitcher is. And in last season, Kenley Jansen was third with the bases empty at 25.6 with runners on base. You're never going to believe this. He was the absolute worst at 31.4. So if anybody has some adjustments to make, it's going to be him. And what's interesting too is that when you look at their leaderboard, I think relievers across the board are the ones who are really going to, I guess, be impacted by this more. Maybe it's the nature of coming into the game when one pitch can mean more than it does maybe in the second inning or something like that. So the relievers in general, I think, are going to be the ones who are most impacted by this. But Kenley Jansen, and he's come out and said it, like, I'm slow and I didn't realize I was that slow. So it'll be interesting to see if he can turn that around. I think the younger ones, maybe. I don't know if it's an age thing, if that gives you an advantage or not. I guess we'll see. But certainly, if you're pitching quicker, I think there's going to be more wear and tear on your arm, maybe. I'm not a doctor, but I would assume that if you're pitching max effort, going all out in shorter bursts, I would assume that would be harder on your arm. So I'm waiting to see, first of all, if Kenley Jansen can make those adjustments, and then how his body responds to it being an older age, but even relievers coming back from injury, like the Blue Jays signed Chad Green, somebody like that. Is a quicker tempo going to hurt them? Is it going to help them? I mean, those are the kind of things that I'm interested in watching.
Yeah, with the minor league system, we've seen it in the pitch clock the last few years. I went to plenty Norfolk Tides games last year, and it didn't seem to be any type of impact. Honestly, you weren't with the minor league system last year. You couldn't see the pitch clock unless you were actually looking for it, at least as somebody in the crowd. That's not going to be the issue, or it's going to be the case in MLB. It is right there. I mean, it is right next to home plate. If you're watching on TV, you are going to know the pitch timer. Everyone's going to know the violation. There's also a clock in center field for the ump. He also has a buzzer system to pay attention to it. I think the pitch timer, some people think that the clock needs to be a little bit smaller. I mean, that's just semantics. I think that's just fine, to be completely honest. I like this style. I go back to this Padres Mariners game, how we saw 2.5 hour game. If that is the average from here on out, this is going back. This is that helps that youth movement. Somebody will sit down and watch a 2.5 hour game that is bam, bam, always something going on. Not half of the time we're just talking, having some commentators talk about how this guy's a 5 tool player while he's brushing his sweat off and getting ready. A 30-second average pitch compared to a 15-second average pitch is huge. And it doesn't sound crazy when you think about it just as one pitch. But when you're talking about 100 pitches on each side, you're talking 150 pitches on each side. That stuff adds up. And we really saw it in the spring training game with the Mariners and the Padres. We're going to see a lot more as spring training progresses. One last thing I have about this. We talk about all these players and pitchers that are dealing with the pitch clock. It's brand new. We're seeing them deal with it right now. A lot of the stars are going to be in the World Baseball Classic starting on March 8th. They are not going to be with the new MLB rules. Now, do you see these players having some issue once they come back from the World Baseball Classic dealing with the pitch clock once again?
Well, I mean, if they're smart and if their clubs are smart, they would be under strict orders to follow Major League Baseball pace of play. I mean, if it would be difficult to do it the opposite way, to play Major League Baseball and not follow their rules, obviously. So it makes sense, stick with the Major League Baseball rules during the World Baseball Classic, even if that doesn't impact you later on when the tournament's done. I think the smart players will. That's what I would do, use it as an opportunity to get in-game. And spring training games are a little different, obviously, than the World Baseball Classic game. So I think that'll be a good place to test it out in kind of quick action, live action, and in meaningful games. So if they're smart, that's what they would do.
Yeah, let's see if it happens. March 8th is when the World Baseball Classic starts. We'll have you covered with coverage here as we talk about some predictions of that here on in a couple of weeks as well. All right, let's talk about the defensive shifts. And it's really not banning the shift, it's restricting it. And it's really pointed towards the infield as well. With the infield shift, we have to have 2 players on each side of second base now. We're not going to see that rover, if you will, in the outfield, at least from an infielder's perspective. Now, I think the other thing that comes into play here is that you can't substitute players to each side unless there is a substitution happen or between innings. So, for an example, if you have your stud shortstop and you want to move him over to second base to be just to kind of act like that rover, you can't do that. You have to keep him at the shortstop position on the right side of second base until the inning is over or there's a substitution. What I didn't understand or what I did not see in the rules was if a pitcher change comes into play, is they're allowed to switch during a pitcher change. I'm not sure if that's the case. I think it's only if there's a defensive substitution. If you know, let us know in the comments. I did not see that one. If that's the case, I would be interested to see if there's a strategic pitching change so they can move their shortstop to second. That's why I feel like that's not the case. And then also you have to make sure that you're on the dirt and not in the grass. All 4 of the infielders. I find this shift limit very interesting. I think it's going to bring back a more, just like Theo Epstein has talked about in all the rule changes, and which is really interesting. By the way, Theo Epstein is the one that's really kind of leading the charge here. But he's changing the game, and I find it interesting because it's going to bring back a lot of athleticism. It's going to really premiere the second base and shortstop positions even more. We already talked about the value of how important up the middle is with second base, shortstop, center field. Well, second and shortstop just got even that much more valuable, in my opinion. And then, obviously, left-handed hitters are going to have a heyday. Joey Gallo is going to be able to keep that on his LinkedIn profile one more year to talk about how he's just so good in the shift. Well, now he actually can hit without the shift, and I want to see what kind of season he's going to have.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, before we even continue, Rob Manfred just texted me and said that you misspoke just now, and he's not actually changing the game of baseball. Just so we're clear.
Okay? Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
No, well, seriously, and the number just comes up, like it doesn't even come up unknown callers, just a clown emoji. I don't
Clown
know.
emoji.
It's weird. But anyway,
scam likely on mine.
Yeah. The whole limiting the shift thing is really interesting to me. I think that's probably the most obvious way where you're going to increase the amount of offense and action on the field, and I think that's the most obvious, more so than the pitch clock and more so than the bases, which we'll talk about here in a second. I think this shift, I think it impacts the whole game, even the other two kind of rule changes. I think what I found interesting when you look at who is this going to impact? Like, you know, individual players. Like I know watching the Blue Jays, Kevin Biggio is probably the guy that they shift the most on. So maybe he'll get a few hits this year and actually contribute to the team.
Yikes.
You know, there's that. But what's interesting is, in theory, this should increase the batting average on balls in play, right? So because when you hit the ball, there's more room for the ball to go without a defender catching it. So I wanted to look at, you know, who enjoyed the a high BABIP, batting average on balls in play, and then who had the lowest. Just kind of what I found interesting is that the group of teams that had the highest batting average on balls in play, most of them, 6 of the 10, are playoff teams. What was surprising, though, is Boston was number one at a 313. And then on the opposite end, I found this even more interesting. Seattle, 29th in all of baseball at 272. Now, obviously, from 272 to 313, there's not a huge difference there, really, when you think about it. The Yankees at 276 and the Astros at 278. So you got to wonder, you know, is this going to kind of benefit the teams that are already really strong anyway? Is it going to make them that much stronger, or is it going to kind of level the playing field? I think maybe what happens is, you know, you have the good teams that hitting into the shift, they'll get better, and then the other teams will still get better, and that gap will still be there. But it's just a really interesting observation when you look at, and teams that pull the most, LA, Atlanta, Texas, and Houston all lead the league in the number of balls that they pull, right? These are teams that are playoff teams, or
Yeah.
playoff hopefuls, I should say. Maybe they'll get a little bit of an extra boost.
I'm glad you brought up Texas, because Corey Seager is the guy that comes to my mind
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about this. And there was a really excellent article a few months ago at MLB.com talking about how Corey Seager could benefit with the no shift. He was one of the highest ground ball guys last year, and he had over 20 hits. I think it's actually over 20 hits grounded into the shift, where if it wasn't a shift, according to statistics, it would have been a hit. Now, that 20 doesn't maybe seem like a lot, and you put it in perspective, but that's a 30-point raise in his batting average. And if you would go in that to play, that puts him in MVP category. Now, obviously, he was in the AL, but he would be right along what Paul Goldschmidt did last year if he had that. So put that in perspective. Maybe a guy like Corey Seager really steps it up. I know Texas would absolutely love that, because all the money they spent is not for third place in the AL West. It's to compete and obviously find themselves back into playoff contention and possibly a World Series. I would love to see players like Corey Seager come back into play. I'm really excited about what the left-handed hitter is going to come into play, and what is going to bring in for the left-handed hitter again, because I feel like we kind of lost that over the years with the shift, with the specialty of having left-handed hitters. Yet the pull is fun, and also we're probably not going to see we're going to probably see a lot of home runs. Don't get me wrong, but we're going to get some kind of 90s, 2000s baseball back a little bit, if you will. If you look at the batting average should increase. Obviously, with the shifts coming into play, MLB had one of the lowest batting averages last season. You take the shift away and you restrict it to having traditional baseball, if you will. Take away the Madden rules, the Joe Madden rules, I should add, and you're going to have a raised batting percentage. Now, tell me, would you rather have the MLB bat a 230 average and get these kind of games where you have pitchers absolutely dominate and half of the players on the left-handed side really can't do anything, and you're grounding into the shift over and over again, and you don't even get halfway to first base? Or would you rather have a 280 batting average and have maybe offensive spur a little bit? For the younger generation, they would absolutely love that. For you and I, we might have different answers to that. But again, what are they looking for? The younger generation to get excited about this game. This is a great way to start that. Not only going to still have the home runs, you're going to be able to get those interesting doubles back, those bloops into center field, those between the gap shots. We already saw it in the spring training. I'm really excited for this shift restriction, if you will, especially in the infield, because this is going to make baseball more exciting, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of others, like you mentioned Corey Seager. I agree. After him, Kyle Schwarber's another one who had a fantastic season last year, and now maybe he picks up an extra 12 hits. I think it said, and then he was shifted 91% of the time. Like think about that, and he still had the season that he had, basically based on power, right? So now there's he can somebody like him or even a Seager or Carlos Santana was shifted 98% of the time last season,
Right.
or Alex Bregman, which I found interesting. He would also pick up a few more hits. Maybe it turns hitters into kind of or moves them away from, I should say, that kind of one-dimensional power focus, right? Because I think in cross baseball, that's kind of what has happened over the last few years. Launch angle and exit velocity have gotten into so many players' heads, and I think of Travis Shaw to be one of them, who literally focused on trying to hit more home runs, and as a result, he hit his way out of an everyday job, and it's unfortunate. So maybe this will help balance that out to kind of, stop players from thinking that just hitting it over every defender, and now maybe they can kind of focus on a more rounded approach at the plate.
Here I am now rooting for Carlos Santana to be in the MVP race this year for the Pittsburgh Pirates. I mean, tell me that wouldn't be just something special. A guy that was
That would be
shifted
sick.
90% of the time, old timer Carlos Santana getting himself back in the MVP race. And if that happens, then this shift deserves a lot of credit and a lot more discussion moving forward. And it really
Yeah.
opens up the helm for a lot of people. Man, now I'm rooting for that. I want to see it happen. With the infield obviously being shifted with restriction, nothing is restricted in the outfield. The question was
Mhm.
asked in spring training with the Mariners and the Padres. Like, I know I keep coming back to that game, but it's recent in my memory. Bob Melvin, manager of the Padres, was asked, are they going to do any kind of movements with the outfield? Maybe bring that rover over, do something drastic. He said he wasn't sure. He said he was obviously going to pay attention to what other teams do. He said if it comes down to play, maybe later on in the season, if something strategic comes into play. But really, he said he's not ruling it out. I feel like that's going to be the global universal answer in spring training. However, it's an interesting concept that what if we brought the left fielder over to the other side to act as that rover and still find that shift? And it obviously opens up a huge gap in the outfield. But if you trust your analytics enough, the shift isn't technically gone. So Joey Gallo, hold on tight.
Yeah, I mean it'd be interesting to see how many teams actually experiment with that, right? And a team like the Pirates, sure, like they have, why not, right? There's no reason not to. If you're a team who's kind of has your eye on the postseason, I think you may watch and wait and see how other teams like the Pirates or the Diamondbacks or whoever see how they use it and whether or not it actually works. And then if it starts to work for them, then you may see the teams taking more of a risk and moving their outfield around. But I think if it's me, if I'm a playoff team and I'm not willing to take that risk right off the bat just because I don't know the outcome, I'm going to wait and see.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule anything out though, but that's something just to
Yeah.
keep in mind. Just imagine seeing some outfielders come into play. Maybe that's when a defensive substitution comes in, and all of a sudden your left fielder becomes an extra shortstop. I mean, just a wild thing that's coming into play. All right,
Hmm.
last thing with the rule changes here in 2023 is bigger bases. We are going to see that in first, second, and third base. We're moving up from 15 square inches to 18 square inches. They're making all these jokes on the coverage saying it looks like a pizza box. It's always looked like a pizza box, by the way. Pizza boxes are square. Uh, However, obviously it looks a little bigger. Some of the runners, the baseball players and the runners are saying that it's softer in the middle, harder on the outside. I find that interesting because that could change how you round the base or something like that. Maybe somebody might want to only touch the outside and miss it with all the crazy instant replay things happening. That could be a very interesting concept coming into play. But the biggest thing that people are going to pay attention to, obviously, is the steals. We're getting 4.5 inches closer between first and second base. That's obviously where we're going to see the most steals without question. I mean, is Ricky Henderson's steal thing, is it up for grabs? I mean, that's a real question. And I don't know if it's going to happen in year one, but that record that seemed completely untouchable, is it possible now?
I'm actually going to mention somebody. I'm glad you mentioned that. But later on, when we look around from coast to coast, I've got
Yeah.
somebody who will be the one to challenge Ricky Henderson's 100 stolen
Ooh.
base, 130 stolen bases. I'm not saying book it, he's going to do it, but I do have somebody who will challenge it for sure. And it's actually kind of an interesting connection. Um, what I find interesting, not so much the stolen base thing. I think what we're going to see is we're going to see the guys who steal bases, the Baltimore Orioles, for example, with Jorge Mateo and Cedric Mullins. Those guys are going to be running all day, every day, and why not? Why wouldn't you? Right. So you're
Right.
going to see the top base stealers. You're going to see them be more aggressive. I think that's a given. My real interest lies in the other side of that game, the stopping the running game. Right, this is where a strong team, because obviously stolen bases, you got to be fast. Okay, obviously that's not the whole thing. You got to be smart too, but stopping somebody from running, I think, is the more interesting angle here for me, anyway. So I look at things like catchers and their pop time. So how quickly can they receive and then get rid of the ball? And JT Realmuto is number one at 182. So think about that. Like, that's just insane. Under 2 seconds, he can catch and get the ball out of his hand. And then even, like Tampa Bay has Christian Betancourt at number 4, not much behind Real Muto. So those are the things I look for. And then you look at the other end, right? And who's the slowest at getting rid of them? And Stephen Voigt, um, let me see, Yasmani Grandal. Those guys are going to have a bit of a hard time. Kurt Suzuki, those guys, I think, are the ones to watch. How are they going to adjust? I know, again, following the Blue Jays, Danny Jansen
Yeah.
has already said he's already adjusting how he sets up and all of that stuff. So while we have rule changes that are designed to make the game more interesting or fast or whatever you want to call it, there's also the how do you defend against those things that are designed. So if a batter is going to hit better, how are you going to defend that? If a runner is going to steal more bases, how are you going to stop them from doing that? That's the kind of in-game stuff that I'm really interested in with these conversations, especially the bases, because really it's quite simple, bigger bases, shorter distance between the bases. I'm also, PS, like on a side note, I'm really a fan of a bigger base, especially at first.
Yes.
You almost, wish it was like beer league slow pitch where they had like a safety bag, right?
Yes.
Save those injuries.
Yeah, they
So
do that in
that's an
softball.
aside,
I
but
don't know why. I don't know why
right.
they don't do it in MLB. At least on first base side, where they
Yeah.
have extend first base into the foul line. How many injuries have we seen? And one that really comes into mind is obviously Bryce Harper a few years ago. That's the one that really
Mhm.
comes into picture. A
Yeah.
superstar like that getting hurt and being out for a long period of time. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why they said expand at the base paths. They obviously want also more stolen bases, more
Yeah.
excitement. But one of the biggest reasons was player safety, and I think we are going to see some difference here. You talk about some of those catchers and pop times, and you talk about Stephen Voigt and Kurt Suzuki. Obviously, both of them retired now, moved on because of being older age. But it makes you wonder if this kind of concept was another reason why they stepped away from the game, because they knew they might not be able to keep up and find themselves in the minor leagues. It's interesting. The pop time is going to be very interesting. Yes, that 1.82 seconds of Real Muto, is that still going to be enough for a bang bang play over a second base if you're 4.5 inches closer? That doesn't sound like a lot when you're thinking of it, when you're looking at a ruler. But if you're running at top speed and you got that nice little AWS graphic coming up in the replay, you might not, it might not be a bang bang replay no more. It might be he's already got his whole hand and forearm on the bag before that 1.82 seconds gets there. So I think we're going to see a lot more people try for stolen bases. I don't think you need to have that big of a leadoff anymore as well, or
Hmm.
the same leadoff is going to get you exactly where you need to go. You're going to have more people take stolen bases. The people who excel at it are going to really excel at it, like you mentioned earlier. I'm really excited for this one. One other thing, when you talk about the defensive side, double plays. A lot of people were worried that if double plays, where would they step? Would they have to step over? It didn't seem like an issue in the early spring training games. However, that's something to keep in mind. Will they step on the side? Will they have to change their throw? Makes me worried about your boy Bo Bichette. Is he going to be able to be fine, or is he going to give Vladdy another Golden Glove this year? It's something to keep in mind, right? It's just these little teeny changes don't seem like a big deal when you think of it just as how it is, but the little teeny things that come up, like a double play, like stolen bases, like the pitcher's pickoff issues, disengagement, which we'll talk about in just a second, all
Yeah.
of that changes the game huge, drastically. And we're going to really notice a difference here, I think, just as much as we're noticing the pitch clock in 2023. Let's talk about that disengagement real quick before we move on and get over the coast to coast. That's another interesting thing. I'm glad we saved this for last because the pitch timer was fun. The defensive shift limits are great, but this bigger bag thing, not only thinking about Papa John's Pizza or Pizza Hut, whatever you're interested in when you look at them every time, right? Is this disengagement is really interesting. Now you can only go to pick off the runner 2 times. After the second time, if you miss him, it's an automatic balk. I found something very interesting. One of the reporters or commentators on the spring training game said, well, what if you get him in a pickle and then he's safe back at first base? That's technically a balk. So if you can get back to first base safely after being in a pickle, after them doing that on the third pickoff, you will be awarded second base. It's a balk. So I found that very intriguing. That's just an interesting scenario that I didn't think about. But what's your thoughts about this disengagement? Maybe give a little bit more detail of what this is and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think actually this one has the chance, I think, to be the most strategic of all of the rule changes. I think this is where we're going to see teams really kind of force the other team into making a mistake. When we've had the last few years, let's say a runner dancing off first base and all of that stuff, and if it was anybody except for a handful of people, you're like, they're just trying to distract the pitcher. That's all they're doing. They have no intention of stealing a base. They have no intention of running, whatever. It's just for a distraction. Well, now that distraction actually means something. And it actually could change the shape of an at-bat, an inning, a whole lot of things, right? So that, to me, I think is the the interesting part. This is where the gamesmanship is going to come in, and that's what I love about it. I'm not necessarily a big fan of changing the game of baseball. I'm quite in love with the game of baseball as it is. So these rule changes I didn't think were necessary, but they're here, and so we got to get used to them. But this is the one that I think is going to be the most fun to watch. Can you trick somebody into a balk, that kind of thing? So that's, for me, I actually like this one.
Yeah, I'm really excited for all these new rule changes. At first, in the off season, when they're talking about all these changes, I was being the grumpy old man and getting upset, saying, "You're changing my game." But the more I might pay attention to it, the more games I'm starting to watch with these rules, it's going to change the game for the better. And we see this with sports across the world when rule changes happen. It's for the better of the game. And a very minute time is it where it impacts the game in a negative light? I don't see any of these happening. When we look back 5 years from now and we talk about how these are just going to be part of the game, and it's going to not feel like it was a new rule 5 years ago. It's just going to be part of baseball, part of MLB. And I think we're going to be both excited. And I think it's going to be better off for it. And hopefully that makes the game grow even more. We got to get those owners to stop thinking regional and think national. Maybe some of these rule changes will get them excited because they'll see more younger fans in the mix. Mm-hmm. All right, there we go. Rule changes in 2023. If you have any questions or you are excited about these rule changes, let us know in the comment description below. We'd love to talk about them and get more. We've had a great turnout so far. We are just in spring training. We are almost at 300 subscribers. Thank you so much for making OBP one of your stops here when you're looking at baseball across the podcast form or on YouTube. We're going to be bringing you OBP throughout the season. Daily content, if you will. We'll have our flagship show every Wednesday night during the season. We'll have some other things coming up. We're going to have a Monday morning show coming your way as well, and then obviously content in between. So thank you so much for that. Before we get to coast, again, spring training has just started, Sean. Is there any kind of traditions that you do before spring training starts? Like, is there a book that you read or any movies you have to watch before the season starts? Is there anything like that? While you're thinking, I'll give you mine. I am a huge fan of the book called Baseball Life Advice by Stacey May Fowles. I have read that book 4 times every year during spring training. I love that book so much. It's just a nice way to get myself back into the groove of things. And I also have to make sure I watch Field of Dreams at least once. And of course, Major League. Any of those things that you do before the regular season starts when spring training gets going?
Yeah, I don't know that I actually do. I think that one thing I do enjoy being a teacher, especially after a long winter, those first spring training games, I tend to put those on mute on the excuse me, I project them onto the front of the room and just have that playing in the background. And whether kids like it or not, they always watch it. They're most of them are not like real baseball fans the way I am, but they enjoy the fact that it's beautiful and sunny and warm somewhere else, and it's just something a little different for them. So I do that every spring training because I think I've had so long without baseball that I need my fix during the day as soon as I can. So I'll put on some spring training games.
Absolutely. I love it. Yeah, fantastic. All right, everyone, let's get into our segment of Coast to Coast. All right, on today's segment of Coast to Coast, we're going to talk about the basement. I know we're talking about sunny Florida and sunny Arizona. Well, we're going to go a little colder, if you will, and talk about the bottom level of each division. We're going to go between the AL East, NL East. We're going to go from the East to the Central to the West, as we always do, and talk about the team that is projected, not the team that maybe we believe, but projected to be in the bottom of their division, and talk about why we should still be excited about said team. Here's a little note for you, a little teaser, if you will. Spoiler alert, you should be excited about all 30 teams this year because there's a lot of storylines to be excited about. We're going to have you covered here on OBP. But as always, Sean, let's start with the American League East. And the team that is projected to finish in last place is the Boston Red Sox. And it's still wild to me every time we see that Boston is projected in last place. Now, they are considered to be the best last place team in all of baseball. However, that's still fifth place in the American League East. That is not the reason you should be excited about this team, although there are still plenty of things to be excited about. I'm going to let you hit the realm first. Why should we still be excited about the Boston Red Sox?
Yeah, so for this one, it was a little bit of a challenge, right? Because they actually made some moves over the winter, signing Kenley Jansen and Justin Turner and Adam Duvall. Like they, on paper, it looks like they're trying, at least they're doing something to avoid the basement. And so the first thing that came to my mind was the fire sale that's going to come when they are in the basement and they have all these big names. But I don't like telling a fan base that you should watch your team because in July they're going to have a big fire sale. So instead, I went with Tanner Houck. That's the one reason for me. If I were a Red Sox fan, I'd be watching this guy to see what are they going to do with him. Is he going to be a starter? Is he going to be a reliever? And recently Alex Cora said basically we're going to use him as much as possible, as many innings as possible. That to me sounds like a starter, given how much. I guess how many question marks there are with the rotation. It makes sense. But he himself, Huck, is like ready to challenge for that starting job, but he's saying the right things. I just want to help the team win and do whatever they tell me to do. So for me, this kid has 26 years old, and in 60 innings last season, a 3.15 ERA. The projections don't necessarily see him as a starter. Like the highest here is Zips has him at 12 starts. Everybody else is around 5 or 6 starts. So that's what I think is fascinating, is where does he fit and just how good can he be? Are they going to give him as much of a leash as they can in that rotation? I hope so, because he's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I love that pick. I think that's a great projection. I'm going to give you another one. Look at that. We got two for the Boston Red Sox. And this one might go a little bit controversial, as you will, because this was a guy that came over the Mookie Betts trade. But I think Alex Verdugo is set to have a really good season this year. He says that he feels healthy. His shoulder feels fantastic. He's a left-handed hitter. He's projecting. Well, he's not projecting. He is predicting that he will get 50 doubles this year. And that kind of high confidence is fantastic. I am looking forward to seeing Alex Verdugo do some fantastic things. He is only 26 years old. Now, he will be 27 in the middle of the season come May, but he's still young, still a lot of things to be hopeful for. And obviously, he has some big shoes to fill, and we're going to be probably talking about that until he retires. That, yes, he was the guy that came over in the Mookie Betts trade. What a hurtful trade that was for Boston, especially because guys like Jeter Downs are no longer on the team, and Verdugo hasn't really lived up to the hype. I think Verdugo is going to have a great season this year, maybe something that can turn into, I hate to say it, but it could be the flip, but I don't think that I think he's going to stick around. I love to see maybe a guy like, obviously, Rafael Devers, the face of the franchise, and Verdugo stick around. I think the outfield of Boston is going to be fun. The speediness of Duran will also be fantastic to watch. He might be your leadoff hitter, which is a very important thing to have in the season. So lots of really fun things to happen with Boston, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think the cool part about that, when you have the names and the things you mentioned there, is that when you aren't expected to win, you can just go out and play. and have fun. And this is a year where, an Alex Verdugo can absolutely just sit back and say, you know what, okay, 50 doubles, cool. You know what, let's add 20 home runs and let's just go for it. Like just see what you can do. Let her rip kind of thing, because what else? Why not? Right. And that can be an exciting team to watch. And I know the Boston Red Sox fans they want to see a good team on the field, and they want to see fun and exciting players on the field. They can understand if, it's not their year. That's the one thing I've noticed about Red Sox fans, that they understand not only the game itself, but the business side of things as well. But at least give them a show, right? So Verdugo and Huck and the rest of them, just go out there and put on a show.
Yeah, I think that you are still going to have a great season, Boston. It might not be a season that you're hopeful for, but it'll be enough to be able to put fans in the stands, be excited. You will be in the playoff hunt, I think, at least until the end of the year. It won't be something where we're talking about you reaching 100 losses. I don't see that ever happening with a Boston team. But I do think that there could be something at the trade deadline where it might make or break your season. However, there's still plenty of things to be excited about before that happens. Let's talk about the National League East. And I think that we just went from possibly the best worst place team in all of baseball to possibly the worst, maybe. I don't know. But there's a lot of question marks with the Washington Nationals because that's exactly where they're at. They have brought it down to the nut and bolt. They are rebuilding from the ground up, obviously after the Juan Soto trade. Horrible news from Steven Strasburg, how he took another setback. I think his career is probably done. What an awful contract after having one of the best contracts of Max Scherzer. It's very unfortunate seeing that happen. Obviously, new ownership is coming in. They got to get it figured out before that happens. One of the things I'm excited about, I'm going to go first for this one, is we just talk about the young guys with Boston and how there's some possibilities to be fun and excited about. I'm going to go on an older guy here, Joey Meneses for the Washington Nationals. 30 years old. What a season he had last year. He became a fun face of this team. 30 years old, had 12 home runs in only 56 games last year. This is his first ever spring training. In his entire career, he's getting it now. He gets this chance to step up. It's like one of those childhood dreams that you think about. It's not the superstar dream, but it's just like rags to riches almost style. And that's really fun to watch. But he's a fun player to watch in itself, too. A very good defensive player, very good baseball player as well. And it's just a really fun storyline. It's probably not one that many will pay attention to, but if you get a chance to watch a Nationals game, you hear that Joey Meneses name, pay attention to him, because what a storyline. I'm sure you hear it on the broadcast, but a very fun one indeed.
Yeah, and he's in what looks like a full season coming up, as opposed to just over 200 plate appearances that he got last year. He's projected to have a full season in there and upwards of approaching 30 home runs. And maybe like a couple of wins. Like that's. You know what? I'm with you, and I think that the Nationals have a good mix there of individual performances to watch. They're not going to, as you said, they're going to be a pretty bad team overall, but they do have some individual performances that I think fans should be excited about and should be running out to buy their jerseys and things like that. And he's one of them. Another one for me is Keibert Ruiz, the 24-year-old catcher. Like, excuse me. Didn't necessarily have the best start to his professional career in LA, but now over in Washington, he kind of started to put things together, and it looks like the second year could be he's not going to be necessarily an MVP candidate or anything like that. But I'm always excited to watch young catchers take over a team, whether it's, like leading a pitching staff, which you have to have one first. So maybe we won't necessarily focus on that for him this year, but just how a young catcher comes up and asserts themselves in the roster and on all of that stuff. Like that to me is rather interesting. So he'll be one that I watch for as well.
Yeah, there's some really interesting pitchers coming up in the Nationals organization. Mackenzie Gore had a great year before we traded over to Washington, and Cade Cavalli as well. So a lot of fun names to keep in mind for the Washington Nationals. Be excited about this team. They might not be in the running after the trade deadline. Yes, they'll probably be a 100-loss team once the year is over. However, there's a lot to be excited about, a lot of young talent. If you were a Nationals fan, don't lose hope. There's a lot of things to still be excited about. Let's move on to the Central, the American League Central. And this was tough when I saw that the projected team was the Kansas City Royals to finish last place this year, because I love this team. I think that they have a lot of young core. So I thought that it was tough to see them at the last place, but it was very easy to explain why that they are going to be exciting to watch in 2023. And it starts off with me, Old Dominion's very own Vinny Pasquantino. I mean, come on. How can you not be excited about Vinny Pasquantino? I'm even going to go out on an edge here and say that he is the American League batting champ when this season is over, Sean. That's how I feel about Vinny Pasquantino. I think he is going to go absolutely off for the Royals. We've already seen him hit a home run in spring training. He's going to go absolutely nuts. Watch it happen. Vinny Pasquantino is going to be a huge hit for the Royals.
Wow, that's a bold statement, and I can't argue against it. I mean, here, obviously we're just beginning spring training, and there's a lot of guys who you could point to and say that about. But that's a fascinating one, because I don't think that many people would jump there right away. He's a very, very exciting young player, and obviously a lefty to boot. So maybe there's a bit more success in his bat with the whole rule changes and all of that stuff. But what's interesting, 25 years old, and then you pair him with my pick, Bobby Witt Jr.
Oof.
This, I think next season we're all going to be looking around going, this is just Bobby Witt Jr.'s world, and we're all living in it. That's it, because I think he's going to go off stolen bases, 30 of them last year. I really believe this kid is so good, and 22 years old. Let's remember, doesn't turn 23 until June, the middle of June. So very young, but I think this has got 30 at least written all over him, 30 home runs, maybe even 40, 50 stolen bases next year. We'll see if he can jump that much, but at least 30 home runs, 30 stolen bases for Bobby Witt next year. Book it.
Bobby Witt Jr., Vinny Pasquantino, and then we can't forget guys like MJ Melendez as well. This Royals team is going to be so much fun. MJ Melendez, I think, is the most underrated player in all of baseball, if you will. Definitely the American League Central, and I'll put that on a stamp, and I'll send it to anywhere in the country. However, MJ Melendez, this team is going to be so much fun. Book it. This team will not finish in last place. That's what to be excited about in 2023. I don't believe the projections on this one, but it follows suit of our narratives. We're going to stick with it. But the Kansas City Royals are going to be a very fun team in 2023. All right, the NL Central. This team, again, we saw a lot of trading last year. They definitely built up a lot of prospects. That's the Cincinnati Reds. They went and traded away Luis Castillo. They have just a lot of things going. I don't know if you want to say south for them, but there's just a lot of things that have a lot of issues. What is there to be excited about Cincinnati? Because right now you have the owner who is really just making fans not enjoy being at the Red Stadium. I mean, yes, opening day is fun, and that's one of the most exciting opening days in all of baseball. But what is to get excited about 2023 Cincinnati Reds post opening day, Sean? What are you thinking about for this team?
They are young and exciting in the right ways. We talked about other teams and their bats like Vinny Pasquantino and Bobby Witt Jr., but these guys are actually young and exciting on the mound with Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo. Those are the two that I'm going to be watching for this and both of them should be getting a full season full season in. Nick Lodolo's striking out almost 10 and a half per 9 innings. This is going to be a fun season for young starting pitching, and in the situation of the Cincinnati Reds, it doesn't matter if it goes anywhere, so to speak. These are two young star pitchers in the making, and fans of the Reds get to watch that right before their eyes.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this pitching staff is very fun. We talk about Hunter Green. He throws the most fastballs, over 100 miles an hour, more than any other pitcher in all of baseball by a ton. I mean, a ton. I think he had over 100 pitches over 100 miles an hour last year. I think second place was, don't quote me, but I want to say it was around like 13. It was absolutely incredible watching the huge disparity. I'm with you. I think that the pitching staff is going to be exciting. But let's not forget, in 2021, the National League Rookie of the Year was somebody by the
Mm-hmm.
name of Jonathan India, Sean. And yes, he had a rough year last year, plagued with a little bit of injuries, but in 2021, in a full season, 150 games, his rookie year, might I add, 21 home runs, 69 RBIs. I mean, this guy is fun. I mean, he had a WAR of almost 4 his rookie year. If he comes back, and I think he will come back just as strong as ever in 2023, we are talking about a team, again, kind of like the Royals, who are exciting young core. If they can continue to build up, they have a couple players. They brought some veteran leadership in, possibly a Will Myers, who could be a nice flip once the trade deadline comes along, could be a nice piece as well for the rest of his career, if you will, as well. He did great in San Diego. I really like where Cincinnati's heading. They're not there yet, but there's plenty to be excited about for the Cincinnati Reds in 2023. The AL West is a very tough division, if you will, this year. Plenty of teams spending money. We have obviously the Houston Astros, who at the minimum in the last half decade plus make it to the ALCS. Texas Rangers spending lots of money. The Angels having 2 of the best players in all of baseball in the same squad. And then you have other teams in the mix. Projected to be at the bottom is the Oakland Athletics, possibly the Las Vegas Athletics once the season is over. But there is a lot of conversation of what to be excited about this team. I think the first thing that comes to my mind right off the bat is what to be excited about is possibly you no longer have to be in Oakland. And I hate to say that, but that's something to be excited about. But that's not what I'm talking about. We're going to talk about on the field production. In my mind, it sticks as Ken Waldenchuk. I think Ken Waldenchuk is going to be your most exciting player this year, coming over in that trade from the New York Yankees. And it looks like you won that trade after seeing Frankie Montas being out for a long time now. He is just an amazing prospect. We are going to see a lot of fun out of him. And if you got to start somewhere, I don't know if Oakland has decided that they're ready to start to rebuild and move forward. I don't know if they've decided to do that yet, because we've seen certain teams in the past, like the Pirates, take their time before they're ready to compete. And maybe we're there now with them after they sign a certain amount of free agents. However, with Oakland, if they're ready to start bringing their buildup back, ready to go again, Ken Waldenchuk is a perfect centerpiece for your rotation. And I think you're going to see that this year in 2023.
Yeah, I think it's very rare that a trade involving the Yankees ends up to work out for the other team. So I'm actually quite happy that Ken Waldichuk is I guess going to take the mound for the A's, and projected at 130 innings for the first time. That's quite a bit of a jump over his 34 innings last year. Obviously combining with his minor league innings. So we'll see. I guess the good news is that, again, like a lot of these teams, this is a chance for a young, exciting player to just go out and do their job and have some fun. Oakland is one of those kind of situations where there's so much going on, so much uncertainty off the field. It could be a relief for some of these players to get on the field and just start playing the game and ignore the whole rest of it. And he'll be fun to watch, but I have somebody who could be even more fun.
Ooh.
And he could benefit from these rule changes. And that is Esteury Ruiz, the 24-year-old outfielder with speed to burn. So he's projected anywhere from 20 to 36 stolen bases. But I will point out that in 2022, this young man stole, through 3 levels of the minor leagues, 85 bases last year. 85. If he can earn a job every day in Oakland, shouldn't be that difficult considering, what a mess they are.
Yes.
And that's a good situation for a young guy like this to be in, right? Just to go out there and do your thing, young man. But the key will be, can he get on base? Obviously, in his time, in his 36 plate appearances last year, nothing really that we should be banking on. He didn't do so hot, a 25 weighted runs created plus. So, he's going to have to figure out the bat and get on base and all that stuff. However, in the minor leagues, that wasn't really an issue for him. So maybe some adjustments to big league life and some bigger bases, and this kid could approach the 100 stolen base mark from Ricky Henderson. Think about that.
Wow. an Oakland A beating out the Oakland A
Mm-hmm.
record that many believe will never be touched. But hey, add an extra 4.5 inches on there of an extra 80 something stolen bases. Will he make that in Major League? In Major League this season? Obviously, that's a huge stretch. Speaking of, he
Yep.
did it in across a couple different levels of play. But somebody is probably going to get to that number eventually, especially with all these new things they're adding to enhance stolen bases. Why not be a guy wearing an Oakland A's uniform? Seems almost fitting, doesn't it? Seems almost
Mm-hmm.
fitting. All right, let's
Yeah,
move
and I
on to.
mean,
Go
like,
ahead.
I'm not saying he will, but if anybody has a chance, it's going to be him.
I love it. I love it. You see, look at that. I had a hard time deciding on what was going to be exciting about the Oakland A's because there's a lot of question marks. Don't get me wrong. There are some concerning things. There are some issues going on with the team outside and inside. I mean, there's just a lot of kerfluffle, if you will. Look at me putting that word
Yeah,
in a podcast. But I mean, is
nice.
that even a word, by the way? And that's honestly what I feel about with the Oakland A's. Are they even going to be a competitive team? The answer is going to be no, but there's a lot of exciting things about this
Yep.
team in 2023, and especially if you have the stolen base champ. I mean, count me in, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the NL
Mm-hmm.
West. The NL West this year, I think the projected team is unanimous. It is the Colorado Rockies. There's still some interesting things to be excited about the Colorado Rockies. One, they didn't have a WTF award this year. They didn't go and assign Chris Bryant in the middle of the offseason and us going, what the heck? Why did that happen? However, it did seem to work out quite well until he got hurt. What to be excited about this year? Chris Bryant, he will get his first home run at Coors Field. That will happen. Be excited about that. Um, but before I go into my most exciting player, and it might be Chris Bryant, you never know, but what are you excited about with the Colorado Rockies this year?
Yeah, it's really tough. And I think what I'm looking forward the most is to see if there's an actual path for them to move forward. Are they going to continue to linger in the basement with no sign of getting out of it? That's the first thing I'll be watching for, because the Rockies fans deserve much better than that. So that'll be the first thing. But if I'm looking at an individual, I'm looking to, excuse me, I'm looking to 24-year-old Nolan Jones. That's it seems like they're even trying him out at first base this spring, which is a little bit of an interesting. Maybe it's a kind of a getting him up to the big leagues quicker. Who knows? But he's got the power. He's got lots of power, and he's a good, exciting young hitter. So, and power and Coors Field, I mean, they just go hand in hand, right? Especially if you're a lefty. Like, come on.
Yeah, I'm excited for Nolan Jones. I think he could be an underrated piece. He was having a hard time with Cleveland, but hey, if he can figure it out in Colorado, I mean, just kind of like we were talking about with Oakland, that is a nice spot to do it because there are going to be some open positions ready to
Mm-hmm.
go. Obviously, Chris Bryant health is big. I'm excited about Ezekiel Tovar. I think Ezekiel Tovar, one of their top prospects, if he can solidify himself as the everyday shortstop and get himself up there, I think he can be fantastic. I think he could be in the rookie of the year conversation. And I think that's enough to get excited about alone for Colorado Rockies fans. If you can find a solid replacement for Trevor Story, a guy that can be in the rookie of the year conversation. When we talk about the Colorado Rockies for the last 15 years, we think about shortstops. We think of Troy Tulowitzki. We think of Trevor Story. Now, if you can get a guy in the shortstop like Ezekiel Tovar, that is a perfect place to start. We talked about at the beginning of the episode, the middle of the infield value has only improved, has only increased. If you can solidify yourself with a nice shortstop of the future, you are in great hands. And that is exactly how you get yourself out of the basement. So if he hits, and he absolutely needs to hit, Colorado needs that W in their back pocket after just being hurt and down so long. I hope that Ezekiel Tovar does well. There's plenty of things to be excited about with Colorado. I know that I think they can be a big punching bag of the league, especially lately, especially talking about what their owner likes to say and compare them to the Padres. Not even close does that happen.
Yeah.
But they're not going to be a 500 team. I apologize in advance to Dick Monfort because I think he's got his paths crossed there. However, there's still
He
some
needs to
exciting things to happen.
apologize.
Yes, he does.
Like
I do think
he
so.
needs to apologize. Come on,
Yeah,
telling
that's
your fans
true.
you're going to be a 500 team. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to find a way to sell tickets. Look, I think you have some really fun prospects. Chris Bryant's going to obviously, you got to hope that he's going to play more games than he did last year. He's going to hit his first Coors home run. And look at this bright side. I think if any team should be excited, more excited about this is the Colorado Rockies. You don't have to play the Padres. The Dodgers, the Giants, 19 times this year, only 13. And that is fantastic. That is huge. That is a big deal. That means that you can play more NL Central teams, more AL Central teams, the more NL East teams at the bottom. Or, I mean, it's just a lot of things to be excited about for Colorado.
Yeah.
Yes, it's going to be we're talking about them on the basement for a reason. You are not going to be a playoff team. I think you might be one of the worst teams in baseball this year, but doesn't mean that they're not going to be worth watching. There's plenty of things to be excited about. Just don't think you're going to hit 500.
Yeah.
All right. That wraps it up. Look at right on the hour mark. Fantastic. That wraps it up here for the OBP podcast. We're getting pretty good at this. It only took 13 episodes. The Manny Machado episode, Sean's favorite episode here at the OK Baseball podcast. Welcome in the spring training, everyone. We're glad that we finally made it. The offseason was fun. This was a short offseason compared to the last offseason. Let's continue it that way. Let's never have a lockout ever again. But regardless, spring training should be fun. We'll be back here with another flagship episode on Wednesday night as we discuss more fun at the OK Baseball podcast. If you're looking for more than just a weekly show, we'll tune into the feed and the YouTube channel. We are beginning our 30-team previews. They're coming at you hot, fast, and ready. We're going to have the Angels preview, Pirates preview, so much more coming up this week before we meet again on Wednesday night. But until then, we'll see you back here with another episode of the OK Baseball podcast. Take care.